Hey, good afternoon, everybody. Thanks for joining us this afternoon on Saturday, the last day of SphinxConnect. I'm sure we all had a great time last night, and so some of us are feeling that, but thanks for joining us today. uh, my name is Daniel Acosta. I am the Director of Marketing at Austin Opera. I'm about 3 months in, and previous to that, I was the Director of Marketing out in another organization. I've been in the industry for about 11 or 12 years, and I'm excited to talk about leadership with you all. Today's discussion is inspired by some experiences I had in my first role as a leader. And as I sought out guidance from my mentor and friends in the network and my colleagues, it became apparent that I wasn't the only one having these experiences, and that everybody was having these experiences, especially those of us of color. And that there were some unique experiences going on as well. So we're going to talk about that today, and I'm thrilled to be joined by these lovely people and panelists that I know personally and also through networking, and I'm kind of nervous, so I'm shaking. But yeah, if each one of you would briefly introduce yourself, and then we'll get started.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Dr. Zuly Inirio. I am a soprano. I am a licensed social worker. I am the founder of the Afro-Latinx Song and Opera Project. If you want to know more, afrolatinxopera.org. I'm also the owner of Zuly Inirio Consulting. If you want to know more, sulinidio-consulting.com. And I just don't want to talk about it, take up too much time. Um, and I'm super excited to. I'm also a Sphinx Lead Cohort 5 alumni with Daniel. Shout out Cohort 5. And I'm super excited to be here.
Hello, everyone. I'm Zenetta Drew, Executive Director for the Dallas Black Dance Theater. I have been in that position for 38 years. Prior to that, I had a corporate background. Thank you. My education is in accounting, and that business background is what I bring to the arts. And I have a very unique leadership journey. We'll share more later.
Hi everyone, I'm Anwar Nasir, Executive Director of the the Grammy Award-winning Louisiana Philharmonic Orchestra in New Orleans, Louisiana. I do that when I do my curtain speeches. I like to remind everyone. I said I'm going to talk about that until the day I am off the stage. So we worked hard for that one. Um, I've been in the industry for, I guess, 12 years working for orchestras, another 8 years in working for a ballet company, and it feels like it's been a long time doing that. So happy to be here.
Thanks to everyone for being here and taking the time out. Zenetta, you mentioned, I want to start with you. You mentioned you have, been in leadership for quite some time. So my first question for you is going to be, where did your leadership journey begin?
Thank you. I happen to be an individual who, as we look at the current um, environment and political stage we're all going to be working with and in, I grew up in segregation in the South. And my first leadership, and I'm going to talk about leadership being first, because that's what it is. You have to be willing to be first. And so, going to high school, my class was the first class to integrate the high school that I went to. I ended up being the first black valedictorian of that school, and there has not been another since I graduated. I went to a white university, and I became the first black female African American to get a degree in accounting when there were not 50 black CPAs in the nation. I moved into corporate America and became the first black finance and accounting, a female black finance and accounting supervisor out of 60,000 employees worldwide. And then following that, I, from that university, became the first distinguished African American distinguished alumni in the 116-year history of that university. And then at the international global level, the university and I received the AACSB award for college schools of business at the global stage, one of 30 individuals, and they've never had another business graduate from that university to receive that distinction. And so the only thing that I wanted to say is before moving into to the nonprofit world, I learned what it meant to be first, and that self leadership is the key to becoming a leader and transitioning from management.
Thank you. That brings up a really great topic in terms of being first and our expectations going into roles as leaders, managing expectations, and then setting ourselves up for the expected and unexpected. How have each of you managed personal expectations going into leadership roles, and what were those outcomes personally, and then afterwards in terms of like what happened after, if those did come to fruition?
I guess I could share. So I'll say that my leadership journey, something that before I got into the nonprofit sector in arts and culture, I was actually in leadership in higher education. I was a associate director, then co-director for the Center for Ethnic Studies Research at the University of Pittsburgh. So that looked a little different than being in the nonprofit sector. But in terms of expectations, there was a position that I had as an executive director for a nonprofit organization for a short period of time. And I would say that I had specific expectations because it was aligned with my values and my identity. So I thought that I would be safe in a lot of ways, or not experience some of the things that I would experience in more white spaces. And what I learned is that white supremacy culture is white supremacy culture, and we all internalize it. And even in a space where you thought that because of that aligned identity, you wouldn't experience those things, you still do. Because there's a certain self-awareness as leaders that we need to have of how we've internalized the systems that we're in so that we don't recreate them. And that is work that all of us have to do, regardless of how we move in the world, what our identities are, and the varying levels of, intersections of oppression that we experience. We all internalize the systems that we're in. And that was very sobering for me. It was a very difficult experience. And it prompted me to really just invest in myself and the vision that I have, and find my community that sees that vision so that we can build together and do the work together. So it definitely, I learned a lot from that experience.
It's a really fascinating question because, I think about, for me, as I've charted my path forward, is understanding what is it that I want out of my career, finding what my own personal North Star is, and every day is like a step forward. More often than not, there isn't, I do X and then I get Y. Life just doesn't really work that way when it comes to managing your own career. So sometimes you have to set forth and thinking about what your goal is and how you're going to chart that path forward, understanding that it's not going to be a straight and direct line. And sometimes that comes with understanding that we are sometimes not going to live up to our own expectations. They're going to be very, and we've talked about this a lot, that there's going to be sometimes imposter syndrome that we deal with, because more often than not, there aren't a lot of people that look like us in these roles. So taking the step forward and saying, all right, this is what I want. This is how I think I want to get there, relying on our communities to help uplift each other and say, how did you do that? Or how do you tackle this problem? Or how are you showing up in this space every day? And it's never going to be perfect. And I think I've had to let go of my sense and desire for perfectionism and just think through, I'm just going to do the best that I can. And sometimes that comes with things where you have a lot of high highs and a lot of big successes. And then sometimes there are moments where you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. So you have to encourage yourself and push through and understand that, like, the work that I'm doing is making a difference in someone's life. Most of us are in nonprofits. So understanding that, the reason why we're there is to change the communities around us. And I have those moments where I say, I'm making a difference, I'm making an impact. And when you look backwards, right, you're like, wow, I actually was able to do some of the things that I had set out to do. When you're in it, you're in the trenches and you're like, I don't know if I'm gonna be able to get to the other side. But you just keep putting one foot in front of another and you say, I'm just gonna try to do a little bit better every day. And that's how I get through it on a day-to-day basis.
So Managing expectations for yourself. That's the question, right? I made a list. Just going to give you 5 because with such a long trajectory of experience, I've got about 50, okay? But the first one I want to give you is that there's nothing, you should need to recognize there's nothing more personal than leadership, and that's your uniqueness. You're in that position because you're unique. You bring a certain aesthetic to the job. You also bring your own vision, you bring influence, you bring your personality. Don't try to be someone else. And the last thing in that segment would be keep your standards. Many times people compromise because you're trying to adjust to others' expectations. But that's number 1. Number 2, learn to be comfortable with the solo journey. Somebody's got to be first. Okay, enjoy the rare air. We usually get very uncomfortable when we are sitting solo. That's why I wanted you to hear that first before. And so what you have is exclusion and isolation come with the job. When you're a leader, that's just part of it. So understand that when you take the role. 3, accept the fact that people of color and women, whether it's right or wrong, you're going to have to work harder, do more, be more. That's a fact. And so don't spend time playing the victim. And many times we move into a leadership position and we assume that we're going to be accepted. And I don't say don't assume that you won't be accepted, but at least don't play the victim. I want to give you a little statement to use. Emotional sparring gets you nowhere, but intellectual sparring lets you win with integrity. And so when you are playing the victim, you are emotionally sparring. When you're using all of your intellect, you're intellectually sparring. And most individuals that you are leading cannot intellectually spar with a person of color or a female because we have learned to be exceptional with those skills in order to even get the position. Number 4, know that perfection is your number 1 enemy. And guess what? Most of the people that you are trying to be 100% perfect for don't even know what 99% perfection is. So if you get 99.999, you've done well because there is no such thing as 100% perfection because no one's absolutely perfect. So stop being hypercritical when you move into a position. And then last, don't second guess your management skills. You know why? Because you learned them. If you can manage a 5-year-old, you can lead a team. Okay? Same skills, same thought processes, just more capable words, educational. And when someone comes to you and says, they won't play with me, they won't let me have my toy, it's the exact same thing. So I say those 5 things because those are the traps that I've seen most frequently in setting the expectations for early career professionals.
Oh, thank you. That's some really, really great advice. And I, do think that knowing as people of color and being in spaces that aren't built for us and us going through imposter syndrome, putting more added pressure on ourselves to prove that we are there and then start to second guessing our decision making and the things that happen, even though we internally have a gut feeling that those are the right things, is a huge part of that and can take a huge mental toll on, how we feel as leaders and what we lead and then just being in the space in general.
Can I say something about imposter syndrome?
Yeah.
Thank you. So I want to impart this with all of you because it's made a huge difference for me and for some of the folks that I work with, that I coach, and also that I work with as a therapist. Dr. Raquel Martin, you can find her work online, and she says, she's a psychologist, and she said something about imposter syndrome that really resonated with me, which is, I have never met a person, she specifically was talking about the Black community. I've never met a Black person with imposter syndrome. I have met Black people that have the appropriate responses to being in spaces that were not built for them. I have not, this is Dr. Raquel Martin, by the way. This is not me. I have never met a Black person with imposter syndrome. I have met Black people with the appropriate responses to spaces that have not been built for them. And what that does is not put the onus on us, like there's something wrong with us for feeling that way, because it's not anything wrong with us. It's the space. Remember that. Because this society wants to put the onus on the individual for structural systemic issues of exclusion. It's not on us. So please remember that in your leadership journey.
Thank you for that. That's powerful. That's really great. So speaking of, being in spaces not built for us, let's say we're in this position of leadership and now we have a seat at the table and, but it's great. Here you go, we're at a meeting. You're invited to the table, but you're not invited to speak, right? So you have to navigate your leadership role as a person of color in those spaces and trying to figure out how to do that. So what advice do you have in making your voice heard? And how should leaders show up and utilize their gifts to do the job they know they can do and that they were hired to do?
Come on, notes, come on.
Okay, so first of all, the spaces are not built for you. They have not been built for you, so know that going in. And you should not expect to be invited to speak. Speak up. You are at the table. She talked about imposter syndrome. Look, you worked harder, did more, worked longer to get in the room. The other people are the imposters. Why are they there? Okay? So you deserve to be there. So when you look around that room and you're not called on, then speak up. We have a tendency as people of color to wait for permission. We raise our hand. We say, may I speak? And what you have is you have Joe. He just blurts out something. Okay? Now, if you don't know who Joe is, he's Bubba in a suit. Okay? And it doesn't make any sense, okay? So the first thing is you have a position and you have power. Use it. You have a voice. Own it. And guess what? We just went back to that 99%. You may be wrong, but you are there to be able to bring a new, authentic voice into this conversation and to help create a new room. Is everybody with me? Okay, so the idea is that, let me see what else is. You need to be able to share power when you get in that room. So I got one little other tidbit of advice, because when you first become a leader, then Joe or someone decides that they want to repeat. Nobody understands anything you say. And then they repeat exactly what you say. So this is what leadership sharing power looks like. Say what you have to say. And then go to Joe and says, Joe, would you please repeat that so everybody else will hear you say it, and then they'll understand it? And you just shared your power. And guess what? Joe won't do that anymore. So I say that for leadership and being in the room. Your voice counts. Use it. Don't be scared.
I try to be judicious with my words too. So when I say something, that I mean it. Creating space for others too, I think is really, really critical. I really, in any space if I'm at the table, I'm gonna have something to say, but it's gonna be because I need to say something, right? I never just say something just to say it. You don't always have to speak on everything. Because then sometimes your words lose power. So that's the big thing for me is like if I'm in the room and I'm gonna say something, know that I mean it and know that it's coming from a place of I'm trying to improve whatever we have going on. And sometimes we also, and this is, I would say it's a gift that when we're in those rooms where we might be the only one, is we're unfortunately having to speak for more than just ourselves sometimes. And that's okay. But also being comfortable to say that I don't speak for all of us. I don't speak on behalf of all Black people. I speak on behalf of this Black person right here. And understanding that all of us may be different in that. and what we want, what we desire, what we need. So I say, go ask them how they feel and what do they need, instead of asking me to speak on behalf of them. So knowing that sometimes you have to do that, but then also knowing that you can also create space and opportunity for others to say it's important for there to be more of us at the table too.
There's a couple things that came to mind because these are incredible panelists. I'm very lucky and honored to be with all of you. Speaking on making space for others, it's, being the first one, absolutely, but don't try to be the only one. Don't fall into the trap of white supremacy culture, of scarcity mindset that I got to this level, so I'm gonna now start gatekeeping. Because we know that happens in our community, right? Don't do that. Why? Think about how our ancestors survived. Was it being the only one? No, it was community. It was taking care of each other. It was being there for each other. It was taking care of each other's needs. So when I'm in a room that I've been invited to, or that I'm there and I'm taking up space as Zuly, yeah, I'm speaking my community's names in that room. So, oh yeah, you have that need? Oh yeah, well, I know so-and-so and da-da-da-da-da-da, right? Also, speaking about not being the representative for your community, being the founder, executive director of Afro-Latinx Song and Opera Project, that's something that I started, 5 years ago? Then people were like, wait, what is that? So first I had to explain to people what Afro-Latinidad was. Black people in Latin America? I'm like, where do you think those boats went first? What, about 500 years before there was a single black person in what is now the United States? Where do you think 95% of people that were enslaved ended up? Hello? So that just tells me that the narrative of Latinidad, that there is nothing other than this mixed mestizaje situation, worked because they think I don't exist. So there's that. Then it's like Afro-Latinidad, Afro-Latin people contributed to classical music. I was like, there is black people up and down classical music from the beginning. Okay? Now that the narrative does not say that, is by design. Okay? There's that. So then now I become the face of Afro-Latinidad, and only the way that Zuly represents it becomes, oh, that's Afro-Latinidad. No. The Black diaspora is vast, it is nuanced, it is intricate, it is beautiful. I constantly have to tell, yes, this is Zuly Afro-Latinidad. I make the space for us, but there's so much nuance in this. Just like there's so much nuance in other communities of color. So combat that idea of making these very broad definitions of who we are in the littlest of ways and in the biggest of ways.
Can I ask you a question?
Sure. Yes.
That brings up a really good point on being yourself in a space.
Yeah.
And defining who you are before
Yes.
somebody else defines you.
Yes.
And I know that you have some unique experiences with the Afro-Latinidad project.
Yeah.
And what you just talked about, and having to
Yes.
go through that before you can even start talking about
Yes.
what it is that you're there to do.
Yes. There's sometimes that I'm in spaces where I have to educate before I can even get to the meat of what I'm doing. Because like I said, people don't have a conception of what my identity is. Because the idea of Latinidad within the United States is that we're a homogenous group from a geographical area that have the exact same experience. Latinos come in all races. I specifically come from the Dominican Republic. Did you know that there's Japanese Dominicans, there's Chinese Dominicans? Yeah, hello, there's Dominican sushi. And this is historical, but people have no idea. There's Chinese Cubans, right? There's all kinds of races within Latinidad. Latinidad is an ethnicity. Everybody take that with you today if you take anything I say. Ethnicity, it's not a race. So I have to even start from there. And then I could talk about the project. That can get exhausting, But that's why I do all the advocacy work that I do, like the online things about Afro-Latinidad. I collaborate with people that do this work in the humanities, right? So I'll have scholars, cultural workers, panelists to, disseminate that information. But in terms of being my full self, I'll say, and then I'll stop talking, sorry. Being my full self in any space that I'm in is my power. That's the 10 toes I stand on. Not compromising on that is the 10 toes I stand on. And let me tell you something, that was a journey, a long journey with my care team. Shout out to my therapist, Michelle, and to my community. But when I found that, wow, the more I lean into myself, the most beautiful things happen. Let me tell you, it's been nothing but up. It's like my girl Cardi B says, it's been up and stuck, okay? So I encourage you all to just be in the fullness of who you are, all of it, and do not compromise for anybody. If somebody has a problem with it, that's you, that's your problem. And that's it. Your community is out there. You being your full self.
Anwar?
How do I follow that up? I think that's being who you are is really your superpower, like you said. Like we have the luxury of being able to bring all of our lived experience. Like we can't take it off, right? Like we get to show up as our full, authentic selves every day. And sometimes, you have to be able to have that, like that's a self-esteem, it's self-confidence, and knowing that, because most of us, as we're moving up in our careers, have to go from organization to organization to organization, and you have to reintroduce yourself to new people every time and find a space where you're comfortable in order to do that. So when you start to think about, when you're going through an interview process, or, interviews work both ways, right? You're interviewing the organization, you're finding out, is this a culture that I want to be a part of? Are they going to see me as a full human being and not just the work that I can do for you? That's where the value starts to come out. And, I was telling the story at some point, we all have 1,000 conversations while we're here. You can't remember who you tell about what. But I often wear my sneakers when I go places to let folks know that when you're coming to concerts, you can be who you are, right? You don't have to be in a suit. You don't have to be, in a ball gown like people think. You don't have to be in a tux or whatever the case may be. You can just show up. And I often get questioned, like both internally from the organization, like, well, why does he show up with sneakers on? Like I'm here in my tux. I'm talking about musicians, right? I'm here in my tux and I can't wear my sneakers. I'm not on stage performing. You are. This is how you choose to show up to work, not this is how I get to show up to work. And for the first couple of years, it was often a question that kept coming up. And I remember this year specifically, my board chair called me before the opening night and says, "You're not wearing sneakers to the concert tonight, are you?" And I said, "Well, I wasn't planning on it because it didn't go with my suit, but if you want me to, I can." and I didn't. And so we're backstage getting ready to go on and do, curtain speech, all that. And he says to me, "You look nice tonight." I said, "I look nice every night, thank you." But I appreciate the compliment. So I think just being in our full authentic selves and finding freedom in that allows you to just be, find joy in the work that you do, because you're not worried about how do I show up, how are people going to perceive me, how are they going to take the work that I do, all of that. Just be who you are and allow that to just get you to the next place.
That reminds me of the role that power dynamics play within leadership and when we're in those spaces. And Zenetta, I know through many conversations I've had even before we got you on the panel, you talked about the dynamics of power in the room. Can you share a little bit about your experience with power dynamics and how you own that power?
Okay. You need to be prepared to share power strategically, vertically, horizontally. And you also need to be prepared to politically align yourselves. I know a lot of times we run from politics in organizations, but part of the power is understanding who the most influential voice is. And sometimes it's not the boss. Sometimes I work with donors. It's not the donor with the most money. It is the loudest person in the room who shuts other people down, shuts ideas down. And so your power really becomes a superpower when you can assess the entire environment that you're working in and come up with a strategy to be proactive, not reactive to every situation. Let me give you an example. Moving into the environment that we're going to now live in for some period of time is that there are certain things in the power dynamic that you need to expect. People are going to tell you no, and you should be prepared for that. Your power is understanding what no should mean to you. It's not a denial or refusal or a redirection. For me, at 13, my father told me going into integration, NO does not mean any of that. It means new opportunity, divine redirection. So every time somebody tells me no, you just gave me an energy pill. And I would say that that is a power that you need to develop. The other power is understand that people will be very aggressive in emotional sparring and having power of self-control. Now, what is emotional sparring? That is when people will look at you, say something, dismiss you, ignore you, and it creates a reaction in you that is emotional. You have lost focus, you've lost power, you've become ineffective because you consume that emotional sparring. Intellectual sparring says, I'm going to take you to a place where you didn't think you want to go. So, what does that mean? I work for a Black organization, and somebody's going to call me the N-word. What's the superpower? You want to hear that? The power would be, first of all, when someone does something inappropriate, is to ask them to repeat it. If you're bad enough to repeat it and everybody hears it, then you get my response. Please don't call me out of my name, and you can put anything that you want to hear. If you're going to call me that, this is intellectual, then I need you to put MS in front of it, period. Take that in and the next letters, put an exclamation point at the end, bold it, underline it. Now say it to me. And suddenly you have taken away the power, okay, that others use to dismiss people of color in your validity, your success, your worth, and guess what? Your own ability to actually just be present in that moment. And if you're not present in the moment, you don't have power.
Can I say something? When we talk about power, more often than not, we're talking about influence, right? And we all have influence on how we show up, where we show up, the rooms that we're in, and recognizing the folks that you have around you and how do you impact and make moves within that. Sometimes you have to say, I need you to step up here and I need you to say that. And that doesn't necessarily mean I have power over you, but that means that I can help influence you to do what I need you to do. And we know that sometimes if we're in a boardroom and dealing with donors and, even government folks, that they like to wield power. And recognizing that, okay, if you want to do that, I'm going to use that for what I need. And that's the way I think to really be able to affect change is realizing how do you influence the people around you in a way that's meaningful and impactful.
I want to talk about power in a slightly different way as leaders of color. I want to talk about microaggressions. Microaggressions, there's a really wonderful video when I talk about microaggressions with like workshops and things. It feels like some people call it like a tiny hundreds, thousands of paper cuts right? Or a bunch of little different mosquito bites. Those things wear you down. And that's the purpose of it, to keep you distracted and to keep you not present, right? The energy spent to try to fight every little microaggression, that's the purpose, so that you're not doing the work that you're supposed to be doing. So then you're like, Zuly, but I'm still dealing with a microaggression, right? So how do I kind of cope with that? Community, get you a care team. Who's your care team, right? Bring it to your therapist, your partner, your friends, talk it out. But also remember that you have the power to set your boundaries around how people talk to you. And that's not a bad thing. That's not a negative thing. It's not a mean thing. It's a way to take care of you. Boundaries are a form of self-love. Boundaries are a form of self-care. Boundaries teach people how you want to be addressed. It's not about them at all. If so-and-so says something, one of my favorite ones, I'll give you some examples of my favorite ones. I'm Zuly Inirio, right? So I say my name in Spanish because that's my first language. And they're like, yeah, but you don't have an accent. You speak Spanish for real? Say something in Spanish. And I was like, is this a zoo? Did you pay a ticket? Am I gonna dance for you now? And all of a sudden, they know they can't talk to me like that. I'm like, if you want me to speak in Spanish, how much more are you gonna pay me? Because I'm bilingual, and that earns me some more money. And all of a sudden, they know, I know my worth, right? Or like, one of my other favorite ones, I have very curly hair. My hair is straight. Oh my God, you look so beautiful with straight hair. I was like, I look very beautiful with curly hair too. But thank you. And now they know, don't play that game with me. I'm not trying to assimilate to whiteness just because I have straight hair today. Yeah? You could take your power back from those little microaggressions and people will know to not cross that line again. It's gonna feel like you're being aggressive. You're not. You're just taking care of you. So, there you go.
Everybody up here has talked about community. And before we wrap up and take questions from the audience, I just want to reiterate, and so something, Anwar, you and I talked a lot about, and something I didn't realize until I was away from my community, and talking to a Sphinx lead member this past week about the importance of community is to make sure that you do have community, whatever that looks like, for your support, regardless if it's your family, your best friend, a networking group, game night, whatever. The power of community is just great. And I think it helps us get through so much more than what we think it does. So keep that in mind. And I know everybody up here has mentioned that quite a bit. So I just want to reiterate the importance of community. So I think we're wrapped up with that and we're good for questions. There's going to be a mic, and then you can also scan the QR code to ask a question online.
Yep. So we're going to start with a virtual question, and then I'm going to just go around. If you guys could raise your hands really quickly. Cool. All right. Awesome. Cool. All right. How should someone new to a role handle overly critical feedback that feels off target while also staying focused on advancing from mid-level to senior leadership? You want me to repeat that? Yes. Okay. How should someone new to a role handle overly critical feedback that feels off target while also staying focused on advancing from mid-level to senior leadership?
Overly critical feedback that kind of is getting in the way of advancing from mid-level to senior level.
Overly critical feedback that feels off target.
Feels off target.
Wow.
I would just ask them what the goals are of that feedback. What are the goals of this feedback? Thank you so much for, taking the time to give it to me, but what are the goals? What are the outcomes you're looking for so that I can better improve my performance? And then all of a sudden you're gonna get clarity. And if they can't answer that question, then you know exactly where it's coming from. Sorry, I stand on 10 toes, people, so.
And we know that like feedback is a gift, right? And if it feels off target, then there means that there's misalignment with what they think your job is, and sometimes feedback will come from not even your direct supervisor. It might be a peer, Like, I didn't like the way you did that project, or you're not pulling your weight. It's not your job to tell me that. So recognizing that where the disconnect is, and saying there's nothing wrong with asking questions to get to, the real root of the challenge. So where is that coming from? What is the goal here? What are we working towards? And I like to say, ask for more feedback, right? Keep asking questions. What are you thinking? Where am I missing the mark? What do you need from me along the way, so that way it doesn't come as a shock to you. But also, if it's truly misaligned when it comes time for you to think about moving from mid-level to senior, sometimes it's like you might have outgrown the space that you're in. So it's time to move on to something new. So it's even though it might be off base, it's still something in there for you to hear and receive. That's a sign that something is off and it's time to either move on or really dig in a little bit deeper to get to what you need.
Hi, friends. My name is Brittany Jamai. I'm from Tati. Y'all are amazing, first of all. And I affectionately and respectfully want to call you Auntie. Like, thank you so much just for all your wisdom. Really quick, what tips or practical books, authors, anything you could give us to listen to as we are trying to shape and really apply the things that you all have given us today? So if you have any authors, any podcasts, anything that you're listening to that sort of keeps you inspired, encouraged, and learned in this area. Thank you.
First of all, I would just say, if you have the ability to find some mentorship, that is the first thing to do before a book. I cannot tell you, and I'm just going to say it right now, how much Anwar has helped me this past couple of years get through a lot, and just leadership and having that here in terms of knowing stuff and being able to, understand how to get through things. So lived experience through people that are going through the same thing as you or have been there is going to be your first thing. The second one is, there's an author which is pretty popular on TikTok every once in a while. It's clips. Simon Sinek has some stuff. There's a great book called Eaters Eat Last. That's going to give you some good insight on leadership. And the one thing that we don't talk about in terms of leadership, which we didn't touch on here, is the understanding of being of service to others. And so that is going to help you understand, like, you are a leader, and yes, you have the power and you need to lead and do this, but you're also of service to the people you're leading. So that's one. There's plenty of books out there. That's the only one I can think of at the top of my head.
There's a few that I've been sharing with some of the folks that I've been coaching that I can't really think of the top of my head right now, but anybody that wants to just send me a message, I'm happy to share those links. But yes, I want to just co-sign the mentorship suggestion. This is a wonderful space to connect with people and maybe find somebody that you can continue to build a relationship with that can help guide you on your journey. Having a mentor is building a relationship. Being in community is not necessarily just a transaction, right? So I want to shout out my mentors. I'm a current opera fellow of opera leader of color with Opera America. And my mentor is Alejandra Valarino Boyer at Ravinia. That's my queen. I love her so much, and she's been nothing but amazing. And another mentor of mine that I want to shout out, who's actually has a music background, but she's the head of social impact at Duolingo, is Dr. Kendra Ross. There's also mentorship even outside of our field that gives you a different perspective to help you grow in your leadership and how you're going to be of service to your community as you continue to grow in your leadership.
I'll just add that all of your mentors don't have to be people above you. They can be people in positions that are beneath you. And most of my mentors are people that are much younger, have a different perspective, bring a new voice, and they're able to enlighten me in ways that, say, some people who have much more experience than me and would be considered the folks that I would look up to are not able to imbue as much into me. So I just ask you to be open-minded that mentors and folks that can pour into you come at all stages, and the younger generation challenge you with honesty at a different way that really causes you to grow phenomenally when you're a leader.
Just really quickly, and I'll let you get your question in. I'm thinking about books because you mentioned it. For me, Good to Great. I'm terrible at remembering author names. The book is called Good to Great. Second one is Essentialism, really getting to the core of the things that matter. And then the last one is the first 90 days. So when you're thinking about moving to a new job or something like that, how do you show up within those first 90 days? How do you set your boundaries? How do you set goals for yourself? So those would be the three that I would recommend for you.
I'd like to also recommend that some of the things I've given you here today, they are included in an article in October 2021, the Violin Channel, on the Violin Channel. And it's a list of some of these things that deal with leadership that's much more lengthy than what I've shared.
Hello, good afternoon. My name is Steven Palacio. Thank you so much for, just to echo all your wisdom today. I think it's really resonating with the room. I have a question related to working. I'm coming to you from the classical music space, and I've worked at a lot of capital I institutions, where in a lot of these places, the organization, maybe there is more diversity, thankfully, in maybe the composers that are being represented, or maybe the diversity with what you see on stage, but the staff and the board is still particularly homogenous. So my question to you all is, with respect to the conversation around making space and making other rooms for the community, how or what suggestions do you have for creating those spaces, especially on staff side of creating more space for our community to be included in that process?
Can I ask you a question about your staff in terms of, are you the only person of color who
Yes.
identifies? Okay, yeah.
Most
So-
often, yes.
Yeah. Do you have any connections or affinity groups that are a part of your organization that you work with that have people of color in them?
No.
No. Okay. So that's a lot on you, which is always
And
on us, right?
I'm a self-proclaimed disruptor, so I have
Yeah,
no problem
yeah.
being loud.
Yeah. I mean, some of us have worked in predominantly white spaces, and the last place I was at was predominantly white, and I had one other black colleague, and we were the only two. And so obviously her and I connected, one because we had a sense of humor, and our sense of humor is completely different than everybody else's, but because we had those shared experiences, we kind of understood where we were, right? What I would say is start using this network here at Sphinx and wherever else you go, and try to just find somebody, and at some point that web of network will start to intersect with what you need, and then it'll start to grow. You can't control who people hire on your staff until you're the person that is able to do the hiring. So unfortunately, I think you're just gonna have to kind of find that out in terms of finding a support group or something that you can kind of connect with, and then start feeling your way on how you can make slow, impactful change where you're at. And then when and if somebody else comes in of a person of color that you identify with, or can, even if they're a disruptor, then you can start slowly feeling that out, and then, start making the change that you need.
And also share when there are opportunities that come up, share it within these networks, right? Because we all get calls all the time. We know that there are people that are looking for their next opportunity, and sometimes we don't know what we don't know. So we have to be the people to say, hey, Daniel, this might be a good job for you, and I think that you should go after it. Or do you know anybody that might be interested in it? So really being the person, even if you're not the hiring manager or whomever it might be, putting it out there into these networks so that way people know that these opportunities exist, and slowly but surely you'll start to see change happening.
Yeah, I just want to say exactly that, because we all share jobs with each other, but also putting it in Arts Administrators of Color, that wonderful Facebook group, put it in there, share it with any one of us. We disseminate it to each other, and because the weight of doing all that work on your own is too much. I know I'm a disruptor girly as well, but I know that I can't do it alone, right? So then to take on a capital I institution, that's just too much work. Yeah, and so do what you can without burning yourself out. And one of the ways that you can do that is by starting to build the community by sharing those opportunities. And also, you know, you have community outside of your institution to also take care of you.
How do you support leaders of color in your org when your organization has a track record of chewing them up and spitting them out? That's word for word.
It's hard, right? I think, you know, we've talked obviously ad nauseum about community with each other. Sometimes you have to go into an institution, use them for what they have, and move on. You know, when you see, like, if you're in the same institution, you know, you see somebody having a bad day, say, "How can I support you? How can I be helpful?" You know, it's the worlds that we live in are not, you know, we've talked about this, they're not meant for us, which makes it really hard to show up and do the work that we want to do every day. You know, none of us got into this for the money, you know, because there isn't any. So I think about the, you know, the impact. Lean on the community is the best way that I can say, you know.
What I will say too is that saying is when they show you who they are, believe them. They have continued to show you who they are. And it's a matter of time before either that person or somebody you know is the next one in line to be let go. So like Anwar said, take what you need and figure out if that is the space you want to continue to be in, and then put together a strategy for yourself to remove yourself from that situation if you can. And if you feel stuck, then try to find community. But it is clearly a pattern that is happening, and it's not going to stop, and that takes a cultural shift from all parts of the organization. And that's just, it's going to take a while, and it's not your responsibility to change that.
Yeah. Can I add one thing? Something that a mentor of mine told me when I first started in nonprofit is, you're there to serve the mission, not people. You're there to serve the mission, not people. Because when it becomes about, you know, serving, and I don't mean like the community, you're serving the community, yeah, but you're not there to serve like the leader, like you're not there to be consumed as a human being by this thing and give everything. You're serving a mission. Because then somehow that depersonalizes it a little bit, and you don't feel like guilt if you need to go, right? Because this is all very personal. So it's like you said, we're not doing this for the money. We care about it, but we care about the mission, right? We don't care about toxic leadership, right? We care about the mission. Am I serving the mission well here? But is it taking a toll on me as a person? I got to weigh that out and then figure out what I got to do. Yeah.
Hola, my name is Jonathan Villegas. First of all, I want to say this has been the most inspiring panel here, and I thank you all for being here. I'm a conductor for the New Jersey Symphony Youth Orchestra and Baltimore Symphony Orchestra's Orchids, as well as Peabody Preparatory. And one of my visions is to one day become a music director, artistic director of an organization, executive director, like many of you. So I have a question as to you've answered this already, but how else are there opportunities, jobs presented that we can look for in order to move into the directorial role? What are some tips in finding those?
Arts admin jobs, Musical America, Arts Consulting Group. Who else? Sphinx, Catherine French Group. You know, when you come to Sphinx, some of the folks that post the ED positions are here, right? Like Arts Consulting Group is here. I think sometimes Kathy French is here. Yeah, she was here. So build relationships with those people. Have them get to know you. Yeah.
Keep talking about networking. Networking is probably the majority of how people get those jobs. But I also say when you network, express the trajectory that you want to go into. So then you can start getting advice. And then those people can kind of say, oh, actually, I may not be able to do this, but I know so-and-so who has done this path or might be able to help you, right? And so then you start to build that network of people who can help you.
That was it. I was gonna echo it.
I think we have time for one more question.
Okay, awesome. This is gonna be our last question.
Hi, my name is Maria, and this is my first time coming here, so all of this has been incredibly helpful and inspiring. So thank you so much. My question is, how do you set boundaries respectfully with someone you work with musically and closely every day when it has clearly become personal?
I love boundaries. So okay, so what happens with that is that you're gonna have to redefine the relationship, right? So now they're gonna get new knowledge of how you wanna interact. It's not gonna be smooth. They're gonna kick and scream sometimes, but you have to know that that's not personal and that's not on you to soothe that, right? Because ultimately you're taking care of you. So you have to be comfortable with the uncomfortable aspect of redefining that relationship. Okay? And I know you said that, how do I do this respectfully? Just do it. It might feel disrespectful to them, but remember, I said feel disrespectful. It doesn't mean that it is. Feelings aren't facts. Ooh, therapist Zuly's coming out. Feelings aren't facts, right? So they might feel that way because they're not used to it, but they'll eventually get used to it. And then they get to decide how they want to re-engage. Are they going to be okay with that new boundary? Or if they're not, bueno, I don't know what to tell you, because I'm going to stick to what I have to do for me, right? And you can do that. Like, for example, they want to hang out. Let's do texting, right? Texting after hours, right? First of all, do not disturb is a very passive boundary that you don't have to do, There we go. That D&D, not the game. That do not disturb, wonderful. I do not disturb on the weekends, and I live my best life. And then I get back to it on Monday. That's that. Number 2, you could say, hey, these are no longer any more working hours for me, so I'm not going to be answering anything until the next morning from now on. Punto. Okay? Anyway, sorry. I'll stop talking.
I was just going to say, if more often than not, we're in organizations, so there is structure in place for dealing with folks. So go to HR and say, hey, we need to have a conversation about this. Or if you're in a small organization that might not have HR, bring in the executive director, bring in someone else that can potentially, because their ability to handle conflict is different. And respecting how people show up and how they connect with each other. Some people just can't approach, even though we might share a stand, doesn't mean that I'm able to say to you, hey, when you do this, it irritates me. So use the resources that are there to help you if the conversation is difficult, because that's what we're here for.
We're out of time. Thank you all for being here, and thank you all to these panelists. Please give a round of applause for these incredible people. Thank you. I'm gonna volunteer us for about 5 or 10 minutes out here if you all have any questions for each one of us. Thanks.